Hey everybody, welcome to PDQ Live. Today we're going to talk about the ABCs of APIs. And as an example, we're going to talk about the Connect API that is now available. To help us out with that today, we have the fantastic Andrew Plough, who's going to walk us through the basics of an API and some tools that you can use and will want to use as you start to explore this topic. So with that, Mr. Plough, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so APIs are pretty awesome. As a sysadmin, as people who interact with systems and applications, you're going to encounter them a lot. And today we're going to kind of give you an introduction on the basics and take you a little bit deeper. So what is an API?
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Tara.
Thank you.
Do you have an answer, Tara?
Yes, application programming interface.
I love that
you nailed it. You nailed it.
But tell me, really,
got some notes in front of you, though.
I do, but I really want to know. I mean, this is an honest question. I'm a GUI girl. Why would I use an API? Tell me, really, why?
Sometimes you have to.
Okay.
Right. Sometimes the only way to do a particular thing is through an API. Another reason is because we like automating our work, so we don't have to repeat the same things. Mm-hmm. And using an API really enables that. There's different ways you can automate things with APIs once you know how to interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
Another topic is like maybe you want to connect disparate systems, right, together, have two things talk, like a ticketing system and like an ordering system, or something like a connect and a ticketing system. You want them to talk to each other.
Okay. Well, here's my question for you two, just even before we get started, because I'm super paranoid. We know this about me. How is it safe?
The same way any other auth is safe.
Okay.
Yeah. We can get into that as we kind of dive through here. There's multiple ways to authenticate, depending on the type of API, but there's layered authentication just like there is for like regular GUI logins.
Okay, give me an analogy that will make sense in my mind, though.
So and this is from Kelly. So Kelly knows his stuff. He gave this one to us during our little pre-show yesterday. Mm-hmm. But it's like being going to a restaurant, right? So you have the kitchen in the back. That's sort of like the system that you're ultimately going to be trying to get things from. And the way you interact with them is by talking to the waiter. So you have a menu that has the sort of list of things you can get and do. So you can think of it like requests and responses. So you make a request by talking to the server, who is basically the API. That is your interface to the kitchen. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the simple analogy, the way you could think about it.
I love that.
Okay.
I love that analogy. It's a middleware layer, more or less.
Okay, what's the GUI in this analogy? The menu?
Sure.
I would think it's like a tablet. So if you have a tablet in front of you that you're ordering with, that's the GUI, and the API would be talking directly to the server because, it gets a little off the deeper you go into it. But that's the general concept. Is there's an interface that you talk to through a documented way, and we'll talk about some kind of different APIs. REST is a very common one that you'll see. And there'll be documentation on a website, and you'll read through it and you'll say, okay, here's how I can get this particular resource. I need to send a request to this URL.
Okay. So there's multiple types of APIs. That is what I'm hearing. Yes. Is REST the best one?
The best, I guess it depends. It's the best to use, for me at least. The queries that you generate are just a little bit easier to do with that compared to something like GraphQL. Which I haven't seen as many of those. It's mostly REST. Yeah. So pretty common standard.
You might run into some SOAP APIs, but those are becoming a little antiquated. But you might run into them, so you should know what they are. Okay. And you interact with them in a similar way, but not the same.
Okay.
So where should we go from here? So we've kind of covered what an API is, the different types. What can we actually do? Like, what's our next building block, Andrew?
So there's things that you need to know about whenever you're interacting with it. One of those is methods. So there's a few different methods out there, and they kind of align with CRUD: create, read, update, delete. So those corresponds to post, get, put, patch, and delete. So when you're creating things, you're going to use a post method. When you're reading data, you're going to use get. Updating, you'll use put or patch. Got to check the documentation. And delete, you'll be deleting resources.
Andrew, CM just said SOAP APIs are very clean.
Unfortunately, they're not.
Stop.
But a call out here. might actually be like, just because like this is the common like put get operators, it can be different.
Okay.
So the authors of this API can do different things. So you'll want to check the docs for the API that you're going to work with. And there's a pretty common format for API documentation. Andrew, I don't know if you want to go
a whole bunch.
Yeah.
I think we should look at it now.
Sure.
We'll cover more things that you'll want to look at when you look at an API, because not everything you'll see is like designed just for PowerShell. It's kind of this generic Swagger documentation. You'll find this exact thing in many places. So we're looking at the Connect API docs here. And the first thing we notice is that method right there, the post and the get. Other times we run into like put patches or deletes, but this is the first place my eye goes. The second place is this endpoint right here. This is the endpoint that the URL basically that you need to be interacting with. And you combine this with the base URL. I think it's just v1/API, but you combine it with the base URL, and then you can add some things along afterwards, which we'll look at here, which would be the parameters. So parameters are a way to modify your request. You see them in command line utilities. It's just sort of a generic way of modifying what the thing you're doing returns and how it behaves. So for this right here, we have post, we have a package parameter, and you see it gives a little bit of an example there. It's a string, which is pretty common, but query is something to note that we can look at, I think, next.
Okay. And something to call out.
It's a type.
Yeah, we can call out here like what the API is expecting. So this is expecting a package ID when we do this post method, right? And a target ID. So as you're looking at these, like, and you can't pass things that aren't what it's expecting. So in this case for Connect, like we're looking for a package and it's an ID. I can't give it a package name. I also couldn't give it a target name either because these are IDs. So there's some pre-work we're going to have to do first here to actually use this post method.
Okay.
Yep. And down here, these are the type of different responses that you can get.
Yeah, and this one is fun because it's on the responses. You'll see like the response of like no content response is success. So in this case, no news is good news, right? If you run this API post method and you don't get a response, you assume that it took action.
Okay.
Exactly right. As always, you really want to read the docs. I want to show off the query string and sort of connect this with PowerShell.
Sure. Yeah,
because that is a pretty common way that people do interact with things. And if you look at our docs, you want to get started quick. There are some docs here that get you started really quick. We've gone ahead and taken some liberties of setting up an API key in the background.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you guys jumped ahead like 5 steps. I just want to point that out. Just in case you've never done this before, I just want to point that out.
Yeah, if you've never done this before, for Connect specifically, from settings, you can generate a new API key. And then from that, you can store it into the secrets module in PowerShell and call it. And like Andrew said, we went ahead and already did that so we can just start showing off working with APIs. But if you don't know how to do it, there's the link right there on how to manage those secrets to get to this point.
Yep, there's a link. And I also wrote a blog on the secrets management module, and I actually just copy and pasted all this and just changed the name of the secret that I used to like connect the webcast API. Okay. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and do that method.
Then you went to Swagger. Oh, you're gonna go back to it. Okay, go ahead.
We went to Swagger. I just want to show the URLs. Okay. Because that is a very common thing. And a query string is something that you're going to run into a lot. And it can be a little bit confusing at first. So we have the base URL. So this is the base URL of the API as taken from the documentation. We're grabbing the API token. We're using the get secret thing. You can do this in your own way using get credential. And then, so we'll run these. Then we're creating our headers, which is the way we authenticate. And in this example, we're using a token, a bearer token. So we got our API key, and that's what we'll be using. Okay. Josh, can you enter that password for this?
Oh, boy.
Password 1.
All right.
Perfect. Okay, so we have that base URL, and then whenever we're going to actually call invoke REST method, which is the way you interact with REST APIs in PowerShell, it's a super helpful command. And we pass it our headers, but then the URI, right? This is where we will eventually create a query string. So by default, we will just go to the devices endpoint and see what we get. We get a bunch of devices and some information about them, which is helpful. But if we wanted to get a specific device, we'll have to use this right here, this query string, question mark. And then let's look to see how I came up with this. So this is grabbing a specific device.
So we're going back to the Swagger docs here.
Yeah,
and
just to
we're
see
getting
what
devices.
it's expecting.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the devices endpoint, which if we look here, that is what we are interacting with. So that's good. I know I'm in the right spot. We have some parameters here. Again, these are all query strings. So you would add these to the query string, includes, select some information about them, group, page size, page. Those don't apply to us because our environment is so small in this test environment. But down here we have filter. So string filter will filter on values. You'll see this sometimes. It contains, but here's what we can filter on: architecture, host name, model name, and various other things, which is very helpful to know about. So what did we choose to do? What did I do in my example here? I did host name. So I selected the host name of device I wanted to return. I used the format that they told me. Then there's an equal sign, and then there's the device name.
So Andrew, I have a question here. Like, we're doing some filtering in the query string, but since we're using PowerShell, couldn't we return the entire object and then maybe like a select object down the pipeline in this case?
Certainly could. You certainly could. It's a good approach if you have a small environment. When you don't, and it can put additional, depending on the API, you can put additional strain on it by requesting a ton of data and then filtering it on your end. Mm-hmm. But because it is objects in PowerShell, there's all kinds of the normal where object, select object stuff you're used to works perfectly fine because we're dealing with objects, which is another one of the benefits of REST APIs.
Gotcha.
So we kind of covered authentication a little bit, right? This uses bearer in this example here. Some other ones you might run into are basic authentication, which is just base 64 encoded. With that, you're going to really want to make sure that you are on a secure network, right? You don't want to be broadcasting it over HTTP. It'd be a bad thing because it's just encoded password, so it's very easy to read.
So you're, in that case, you're counting on like a transport layer encryption, not encryption of the actual credentials themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, if someone's catching your traffic, it's not a good sign for you. You also might run into OAuth 2, OpenID Connect. Those are a little bit more fancy. You'll want to check out the PS Auth client module for authenticating to those. It's a little bit out of scope, and it can be challenging at sometimes, but if you're using like the Microsoft Graph API, you'll notice that there's that going on. There's also, you can sometimes pass the API key as a header of X API key. That's another common way that we see. But again, you're going to have to check the documentation for whatever you end up choosing to go with.
Okay. I think the common theme here is when you're doing this the first time, interacting with that first API, the documentation is your best friend. It's really hard to discover in this land, so you have to check the documentation. And I think somewhere earlier in the chat, someone mentioned, hey, if you can upload the API docs to a large language model and ask it questions, that's like a perfect use case for generative AI, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's very cool. I also know that with this Swagger standard or whatever, there are ways to auto create APIs based on the definition. I mean, auto create modules to interact with it. So in PowerShell or Python or whatever language you have, I think it's called like auto Swagger or something like that.
So,
That's
Andrew,
cool.
can you explain what Swagger is? I'm not sure we did that yet.
It's like a standard for creating and presenting the documentation for REST APIs.
Okay.
It's not like
I thought thought they changed the name from Swagger to something else, but I guess they changed it back.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no rules, right? Like I can go document something however I want. This is just a kind of community, large scale community accepted way that we can all share information with each other that makes sense in a common digestible format.
Okay. So this is your friend.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you've never done it before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And it's really important because this is not intuitive. When you go through it, make sure you're reading these, what type of parameter you need to pass, and the endpoint. Those are two very important things. Another thing to note when you're dealing with APIs is you're going to keep track of IDs. Every single resource you interact with is probably going to have some form of ID. And if you want to interact with that resource using a different API method, you're going to probably need that ID. So as you're using PowerShell, sort of keep that in the back of your mind as well. And I think we can show some code examples that use IDs to get a group and then deploy packages to said group.
Yeah, I think in this case, like we're defining those IDs as human-friendly variables. So it's easier to read as a human. So you're not getting back ID, GUID. You have, in this case, group ID variable. So it doesn't matter what the actual API is returning because it's still human readable for us here as group ID.
Because you knew I'd make fun of you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's too hard. No one to remember 300 machine GUIDs. That's ridiculous.
Well, you can't do it, yeah.
Yeah, no one can do that. Okay.
Definitely not. But so in this example right here, we're going to grab the group ID of Tara's besties.
Yes.
I have no clue where this was created, but I was looking through groups this morning and I saw you had a Tara's besties group, so had to pick that.
That's my favorite character.
Before we run, let's just see what's returned. Make sure something's returned. Okay, looks like some good stuff is returned. We're only interested in the ID, so I'll take that and I'll pipe it to select object expand property ID. So we'll just have the ID of that group that we will then deploy some packages to.
Cool. So this is where we're taking advantage of that PowerShell pipeline and the object that was returned.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And now in the next thing, we're going to hit the devices endpoint again, but this time we're going to specify the group ID of the group we just grabbed, which is Tara's besties. And let's see what's in that group. As you can see, I'm selecting just the name. Ooh. Now, I have no clue what these devices are, to be honest with you, so I didn't deploy anything to them.
Well, let's just send it. They'll be fine.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So we got Steve and Dustin.
All right.
They could use something. They need something.
They're my favorite characters from Stranger Things.
Okay.
All right. Well, then I will go ahead and grab. Well, we can list. So we wanted to grab some packages, right? So let's find out ones that have Firefox in the name. All right. Again, this time we're hitting the packages endpoint and we're giving it a filter. And we're filtering on the name contains Firefox.
Ooh, but this is going to be a lot, right?
These might fail because I think I cleaned these out, but let's see what happens. But,
right.
we're just spoiler alert.
Hey, it'll work out.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so in this filter, like the packages filter, we just said like with the I forget what that character is called, the squiggly line, but it's like a match. Thank you, Tilda. Of like match Firefox, and you'll notice that we got like a ton of results back here. Right, so in this next one online, where is it like here, 41? We're going to take advantage of that and then match it exactly with a PowerShell operator of equals. So in the first API call, we're going to do like a contains Firefox, but down here when we actually go to do something, we're changing it to a PowerShell evaluation of equals.
Yep, because we're just dealing with objects here, so we can filter however we want. And package endpoint is a good one to do it on because you're probably not going to have 100 packages that have Firefox in the name. Whereas with devices, you might want to be a little bit more specific. But again, you have the flexibility when dealing with APIs and in PowerShell. So in this, we'll just run this real quick. Bada boom, we got a bunch of packages again. And then we're going to filter for just the one with the name of exactly Mozilla Firefox. And then we'll just grab the ID for that. Bada boom.
See,
lovely ID.
Nobody wants to deal with that. That's why you give it a friendly variable name.
I know why you guys are doing this. You knew I'd mock you.
Oh, yeah.
You knew it. You anticipated it.
I'll grab these devices, and then we will just go ahead and deploy.
Okay. So we built a
Well,
group ID,
yeah.
a package ID, and device IDs, and then we deployed. And it looks like our callback we got back was, what was that, 422?
Well, they failed because those are users. But anyway, you get the gist of it. Dustin and Steve are users.
Oh.
And they're in 365 Azure, not anyway. But pretend they're devices, and it would have been beautiful.
Cool.
Andrew didn't
Here we
know
go.
that, but I know
I
that.
actually grabbed different devices at the end.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
As we were talking
So it
there,
worked out.
he grabbed some different
did,
devices.
okay, sorry.
So do you want to show that deployment that just fired off in
Let's see it.
Connect?
Yes. Was it Cocoa Pebbles? Let's check the.
That one will work, yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Yay!
Right there.
Just lovely. And you can tell we tested this.
You know what I like is just how quick. Okay, why? Tell me.
Why?
Make it faster.
Okay, here. So maybe some use cases, right?
tell me.
Yeah, we did this in what, 20 minutes?
It would have taken me 4 hours to do what Andrew just did. So you got to
Yeah,
sell me. Sell
even
me
the
on it.
First time.
First time. Even if you just copy pasted all this code, right, and changed the names and the filters, there's enough code here to get you almost to the point that you could build like a self-service portal.
Okay, that you can sell me on that. Tell me more. Tell me
Right?
more.
So here, like we're passing this names of host names, right?
Okay.
Like we're saying Cocoa Pebbles, but since we're in PowerShell, we could take advantage of environment variables
Okay.
and have things dynamically run on the fly. So instead of passing it host like Cocoa Pebbles, what if we passed it environment computer name?
Okay.
So now I give my end users this catalog. And when they run this, it evaluates environment computer name and the filter on what they clicked, and they can self-serve themselves Firefox.
Now I'm more interested.
So now I can rinse and repeat this for every single package that I want to have my end users have available. And from now on, instead of a help desk ticket coming in, hey, can I have software X? We say, no, actually just go here and click this and it'll come to your machine automatically.
Okay, now I'm more interested. I like this.
So
I
sure,
like this.
go spend 6 hours, but how many help desk tickets time did you just resolve by spending that 6 hours building this?
Love this idea. Okay.
So this is why you do this. Yeah, for
Okay.
your example of, well, I could have done what you guys just did in 10 seconds in the GUI. Sure, but we don't have to answer help desk requests anymore for installing software. You
Okay.
still do.
Okay, like this. Like this. Okay, what
And
else?
also, once you get through the basics of understanding APIs for the first time, usually it is kind of an undertaking. There is a lot of stuff that can be a little bit confusing. But once you get through that first sort of project, the next time you run into an API, and many services you probably already have in your environment have them, you'll be able to start automating and bringing things together. And as someone who deals with automation, you're able to bring a lot more value to your organization and have a lot more tools at your disposal.
Yeah.
Alex says that you're coding in Italian PowerShell, Andrew.
Oh, I didn't see
From
that.
Matilda or what?
Bada boom. I like it.
Let's see. So, okay, maybe Andrew, maybe I'm not comfortable in PowerShell, but I want to,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm comfortable in another language, or I just want to test out this API in a different, more familiar way. Is there a way that I can do that?
There's Postman. And also any language. Really, every single language that you'll use will have some kind of way to interact with APIs. But Postman is a very accepted standard way of learning about and interacting with APIs in a more graphical way, because it can be super helpful to actually see it. There's a layer of abstraction when you're doing the PowerShell thing that is hard to connect the dots with sometimes. So I personally get a lot of value out of using a tool like Postman to get started. And we have something simple here. So
It's like training
when
wheels,
you-
kind of.
Absolutely. Or maybe you want to test your queries or see what the API is going to return to you.
This
So
sounds good for me.
Connect has like, 6 different methods. Maybe you're interacting with an API that has 600.
That's terrifying.
Right? Maybe you want to start and you have to build these complex ones. This is a way that you can kind of start to layer on top and see what the data you're working in.
Okay, this feels good for me. Continue, Andrew.
So first thing we're going to need is the URL that we're going to interact with, right? We're familiar with this from the documentation, putting it together with the base URL and then the endpoint. So this is the device's endpoint, right? There's the method that you can choose from. This is a get. And the next thing you'll need to do is set up your authorization. I'll try and There we go. So what you'll do is you'll select for this API a bearer token, but really it depends on whatever kind of authentication they have set up. We select bearer token and you put your token there. This is not our full token and we will be deleting this. So,
Yeah, there's something to call out here. Secrets management for APIs are a big deal.
Yeah.
Can't let
For
these
sure.
APIs go, or else someone's taking actions as you from a programmatic point of view. Not great.
And someone in the chat, Celadin, says Postman alternative is called Bruno, which is a little bit less annoying with the whole login thing. So definitely check that out as well. But you put together your stuff up here, and if we wanted, we could add a query string right here. Well, let's just see what this gives us. Bada boom, a bunch of stuff. You can see everything is encapsulated in this data property, which is why in our code, oftentimes we are selecting .data. We're wrapping it in these, I think they're called parentheses. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Like this little smooth half circles and then .data. We're accessing that property and you can see that reflected here in the data. And within that data property, there's information about each device that is returned from the API.
Yeah.
We need a meme for Andrew.
The bada boom.
Bada boom.
All
With
right.
his face. We need
So-
Did I
that.
say bada boom though?
A bunch of times.
A bunch of times, but it's my favorite.
gosh.
Bada boom.
So,
The blah.
all right. So we've gone through PowerShell interacting with the API. We've talked about interacting with an API from Postman when you want to test stuff. What questions do we have, Kelly?
Bada boom, we got some big
we got-
freaking
we
questions here. Can we use Connect's API to install our agent, say during post imaging, rather than using an installer package? Sincerely, Adam L.
I don't see why you couldn't, right? Like we called out Firefox here. So if you had a package in Connect,
Or Connect.
right, and you had that device that was in Connect, you
Make-
could filter for that machine that was just newly imaged and with the environment hostname variable,
Or a group.
Or a
you just
group.
did a group, put all your
Right.
machines in a group.
and then just call that as like a post image task.
See, now that's a good use right there. Time saver.
There's so many
Automate
uses
it.
here. Yeah, yeah, like
You just got to get the device, the
Exactly.
agent on there.
exactly.
I would do it in a group though. Save time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, another question? Why not? Does Smart Deploy have an accessible API? I'm thinking of trying to write a script in Connect to connect Smart Deploy to check for platform pack updates and automate installations. Thanks. I actually have an
So,
answer for this one from Mark.
answered that.
Mark answered this. It doesn't have a public API that's documented like Connect, but there is an API that can be used. So best thing to do is just reach out to us and we can kind of point you in the right direction for that.
Love it. Love it. See, connecting tools. Yeah, less work.
Okay, I have a few more questions if you're up for it.
Yeah.
All right. Here's one from Marcel. The API communication logged, and can these logs be accessed for debugging?
That's a great question, Marcel. I actually don't know the answer to that. I've just been so excited and actually playing with it and using it that I haven't dove in that far
Let's
yet.
ask Marcel. Oh, it's Marcel that's asking. Huh. Let's see. Mark Littlefield, do you know the answer? Marcel's asking. What do we do? We'll find out for you, Marcel.
Okay, have a couple more. How do you limit the amount of transferred data? Not doing a select all columns. Again, Marcel L.
Ooh, Marcel, I think Andrew can show us this one again. Either in the Swagger docs is probably the best place to show it.
So bada boom right here. Oh my gosh, I said it.
Bada boom.
Yeah, so if you look at the
Bada
device's
boom.
endpoint right
Yep.
here, you can see includes, comma separated list of objects to include disks, drivers, everything listed there, Marcel. It's right there for you, man.
There it is. So you can only select the objects you want, filter for it.
He totally wanted to say it. Could you hear it?
Yeah, it did.
He wanted
Yeah.
to say it.
We
Bada
set him
boom.
up.
It's right here. Bada boom. I'm going to say it for him now.
All right, we have one final question. Can you limit what packages are available via the API key, either through permissions or the script? James Badaboom D.
Well, once you're in a script, the world is kind of yours. If you're writing a wrapper for this API, like you can do whatever you want to do. So, you can write it on the front end there. You could write it to maybe a user-specific key in Connect that follows the access roles that you have in Connect. So you can handle it a couple different ways. There's not a perfect or a right answer to that question. All right. I think that's it for questions. So thank you so much for everyone joining today for PDQ. I'm Josh.
I'm Tara.
I think that's bada boom, Andrew over there. Thanks again for joining our webcast. Congratulations, Adam L. Guess what? You just won some PDQ swag. Please do us a favor. Send us your mailing info to webcast@pdq.com. Like and subscribe if you like what you saw today, and share it with your friends. Why not? Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you back here next time.